I guess the obvious first question is, I know you guys are still playing, but you've, a couple years ago decided to cease touring on a regular basis. And that kind of farewell announcement you made, it actually sort of coincided with the release of this second solo record of yours, Radio and Rainbows, and with Cindy's as well. They were sort of around the same time. And yeah, so I'm just wondering, I guess, if it's kind of if the two connected, or if the two are connected at all. Like if when one door opens, or when one door closes, another opens, and this kind of gave you a new opportunity to explore things you haven't been able to do in a while.
Absolutely. I mean, really, this record, Radios and Rainbows, was ready it was before the pandemic. I had
Oh,
all the songs written pretty much. I did write one or two during the pandemic, but they were a bunch of songs I'd written over a period of time, and I had to pull them all together. But I didn't want to release it during the pandemic. And then we did a B-52s farewell tour, which I call the Sharewell tour because you never know. So we do tour coming up. Maybe it's not a surprise, but we have some dates lined up with Devo. It looks like a tour. It's a small, not too long, but it is a tour. And like we said, no more touring. But that's why I said share well.
it's kind of hard to stay away from the road when it's like it's been your life for so long.
Exactly. Just always a comeback but it's true that I had time. I mean, it's really, really time consuming to pull all this together, get the artwork, which I work with John Stapleton on that. And my first solo record, my wife Monica and I did everything together. She did the album cover and the art and everything. And so she's focusing on her own pottery and jewelry making now. So I worked with John on a lot of this. And yeah, it took a lot of time and I had to have a break. The B-52s thing is the mothership. It's ongoing. We do the residency in Vegas, which has been really a blast. You wouldn't think it would be a blast being in Vegas, I guess, because unless you love Vegas, maybe you love Vegas.
Well, I like Vegas for like a few days at a time. I don't know if I'd want to be there for weeks. It's a lot.
I mean, I love it, but I would never go there. I'm just Vegas to gamble. I don't gamble. Being there, though, we've carved out a little routine. There's a great gym, great restaurants. There's a mall. There's an outlet mall, and there's some shopping, but mainly it's to get out into nature. We go. There's a couple of beautiful canyons nearby.
You kind of like wanted to do solo stuff way before you did, like in the 90s, but you felt it would like be a betrayal. I think that was the word you used to like, or it would be kind of going against the band. And I'm curious why you
Yeah.
thought that, because a lot of people do solo stuff, on the side.
I mean, Fred did a solo record, and it caused some disruption. And it's a family. Our band is very family dynamic. There's no leader to the band. We write collectively. I don't know any other band that really writes together as much in the same way we do. We don't each bring songs in. We just kind of jam and write with some exceptions, but the most part we jam on things. And so it's such a collective experience. So it did feel, and this is my own, in my own head, was sort of a betrayal. Of course, I don't think anyone really would have had their feathers that ruffled, but it's also taking time out and the possibility of disrupting whatever comes up for the B-52s and the fears, I guess, are they going to go off on their own?
That's one thing I was wondering, because around the time that the B-52s were having, I don't know if you want to call it a renaissance, but like this incredible run in the early 90s, you also were sort of having a little side solo run with the songs you did with REM and Iggy Pop, which some people might have thought, whether it was deliberate or not, was sort of like priming you. Sometimes that happens, like, you start doing one-offs and that sort of like is a soft launch to a solo career. Was that the case at the time? Were you sort of testing the waters with those solo guest spots?
I got an invitation from a former member of the Plastics. So they're a Japanese punk band that opened for us. And one of them became a huge producer and invited me to come do a project in Japan and with the singer Yuki from Judy and Mary. And we wrote a whole bunch of songs together. It was really amazing. And we toured Japan. And then I realized I can write with anyone. I can write with someone who doesn't speak the same language. It was really kind of clicked and opened the opening head there. And I had written songs in high school. I had a folk protest band called the Sun Donuts. So I always wrote songs, but somehow when I was with the B-52s, I felt like, oh, I can't write anything without the band.
Mm.
So this opened up a new vista for me. And after that, I started writing songs and collaborating. And I had all these songs ready. But I guess that's one little regret I have. Why didn't I just at that point, sort of after Cosmic Thing, when we did Good Stuff, Cindy left, why didn't I just go off? And I guess because there's the pull of the mothership, and I don't regret it because the B-52s I'm so grateful, and it's been such a great experience. And we still love each other. We're still like a family. We still hang out. And so losing that would have been like really tragic. I really valued my relationship with the band. And then I realized I could do both.
I'm curious, you mentioned that it caused some friction, you said, when Fred did solo. Did it cause any friction when you kind of went off and did, these? I mean, I think the only like real Billboard hit Iggy Pop ever had was Candy with you. And of course, Shiny Happy People brought REM to kind of a whole new pop. They were already obviously successful, but like that was a huge hit for them. But did it cause, any resentment when you did those songs?
No, actually, when I sang Candy, everyone advised me against it. A lot of people said, don't do it, don't do it. I don't know why, but maybe it was that thing, you don't want off, but I did it and it was great. And it didn't cause any friction or anything.
The B-52s introduced RuPaul to MTV. I think the first thing RuPaul did on a major level was the Love Shack video. Am I correct in that?
I think so. I mean, we knew him back in the Atlanta days.
Oh, wow.
He had a wee wee pole and two backup singers called the U-Hauls. I mean, I knew he was going to go big at some point, because when we did the Love Shack video, he just organized that thing. He was just, everyone get in the dance line. And he was really, his enthusiasm kind of helped kind of get that video more like a party.
So now with your first solo album in incredibly like 9 years, obviously there's some political stuff on this record that I would qualify some of the songs on this album as protest songs, maybe not folk songs, but protest songs. What was inspiring you when you were writing this one?
Well, obviously the political climate. I mean, when I was writing them, I guess it wasn't bad like this, but Radios and Rainbows does have a political message. And I'm referencing Star Spangled Banner, and I was also referencing, it's mainly about how to tell the truth from the lies. That's one of the lines in there. So I think it has that content of just thinking about what is truth, what are we being lied to about. And I'm a child of the 60s, so I protested for the civil rights movement and for anti-Vietnam, and of course during the AIDS crisis. And we did a lot of work with PETA. So the band has been consistently involved, not with one particular group, but we've always ready to do benefits and anything that can sort of further, I guess, human happiness and love. So I definitely, harking back to that time when I was a protest hippie chick, that's always been in me. I think that hippie chick has always been alive in me, that I just want to sort of look at things more closely. I'm really interested. I'm kind of political junkie. I watch Rachel Maddow. My wife and I watch her every night now that she's on every night. And I got to meet her. I kind of wanted to just say something. And I didn't plan on it. And that's the beauty of songwriting. And when I write and collaborate with other people now, they usually do the instrumentation and I do the lyrics and the melody and stuff. So what comes out surprises me a lot of times. It's like, what? I didn't expect it to be about that. So the lyrics just kind of, you just have to let it get into the collective unconscious and let it roll.
I feel the B-52s, like obviously you had a colorful image and a lot of humor to what you did, but I feel like maybe sometimes some of the political messaging you had, I mean, maybe people will be more receptive to it because it's in that kind of happy package. But like, I don't think people even like wasn't the first single from Cosmic Thing. It was Channel Z. It wasn't Love Shack. It was a song about something we're all even more worried about now, the environment. Like, was that always kind of a part with things of whether you're doing it solo with the B-52s, like sort of like delivering maybe a more serious message under the surface than people see behind at first because of, the wigs and the outfits and the videos and all that?
Absolutely. We've always had, I mean, we are all on the same page politically, the band, and that comes out when we jam, all those kind of political messages. And they are subtle. We never wanted to hit people over the head with things because after all, we are a party band. I think, it doesn't really work. Well, it can work. And when you have a folk protest song, or Bob Dylan songs influenced me so much. And all the folk protest movement songs during the 60s, when the folk movement was hits, that informed me politically. Pete Seeger and Bob Dylan and Joni Mitchell and Buffy St. Marie and all those people that had messages. It really there was no internet or anything. So I learned a lot about politics through songs. So it's always been, I think, in the collective mind too of the band, that kind of consciousness. It's never planned. It's never like, let's write a political song that really, has a message. It just comes out.
The title track of Radio Rainbows, I believe it's the title track, it references John and Yoko, who, the reason I bring that up, obviously, they were very politically active and had messaging as well. But I've read that at the time the B-52s were first starting, John Lennon said the B-52s were like his favorite band, and that, Rock Lobster was a big inspiration, I believe, for the double Fantasy record. I don't know if you have any more insight into that, if you ever had a chance to meet him, because sadly he died right around the time that your band was coming to fame.
Well, I never met John Lennon, but we were always big fans of Yoko Ono. So in fact, Rock Lobster, at the end that Cindy does, and we do some of that in the fish sounds, that's directly inspired by Yoko Ono. And when John Lennon heard that, and I didn't even know this so much at the time when this article came out and it mentioned, because people told us, oh, do you know this article came out and John Lennon mentioned you? But apparently he was in a club and heard Rock Lobster and heard that, and he thought, that's, we're back, Yoko, our sound is back. And he loved Rock Lobster. I'm not sure he was a big fan of the band or even heard of the band before that. When he heard that, though, that really inspired him. And that's amazing because John Lennon was my favorite Beatle. And I've gotten to meet Ringo and also Paul McCartney, who was wonderful because he was a big PETA supporter. So we actually opened for him at one of these PETA events. And he was just so gracious and nice, and it was just wonderful. But I never got to meet John. But Yoko came and sang with us on our 25th anniversary.
Wow.
She let it rip. And then Fred and I sang with her on her 70th birthday. And I interviewed her once for Rolling Stone, but I never asked her about that particular thing.
I mean, there is at least in talks, like a documentary, or there is a documentary about the B-52s that I believe Fred Armisen is involved in. I mean, you guys obviously have such an amazing story, all the things you've been through, the good times, the bad, different iterations of the band. I mean, what are the plans for this film?
Well, Craig Johnson actually came to us and wanted to do a biopic, and he did Skeleton Twins, and he's done other movies, but he's a movie maker, not a documentary maker. So he wanted to do a biopic, and not everyone wanted to do that. That sounds great. Who's going to play me? Now it's sort of stalled a little bit because of the crisis of documentaries. There has been, in fact, the Woodstock Film Festival had a whole panel on documentaries in crisis because there was a glut of them and the funding, and I'm not really sure the business aspect of it, but it's almost done, and it's going to come out for sure. So it's there. All of it's filmed. There's been so much archival stuff, and the archivists were just overwhelmed with all the stuff we had. we all had footage and we had video and we had, Super 8 and Ricky and Keith had a video, you know, camera way back in the beginning. So it was all kinds of footage and they've interviewed just everyone. So
That's amazing.
they just interviewed was finally Michael Stipe. It was hard to pin him down.
Did he
Yeah.
talk? Did he talk about his mixed feelings about shiny happy people?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
don't know. I haven't seen anything. Not a thing. I just know, what I gave them to use and the interviews that I did, but I haven't seen any clips or any kind of. I don't think they want to show us anything because you know how it is. Everyone in the band will want to have input, and then it'll just become.
Am I correct that I've read that Fred Armisen is involved in this documentary?
He's amazing, and we just did the Saturday Night Live concert, and he was our drummer, which was so amazing. And he's come to a bunch of our shows, and he also was in my previous solo record.
How did you guys come to be on that short list of artists that had the honor of being part of the 50th anniversary concert? I know Devo played, I believe, as well. And what was that like? That must have been amazing.
Apparently, it was all up to Lauren Michaels because that's one that really chose all the bands, as far as I know. So it was really, really great that we got to do that concert. It was just really fun. And after we were a little bit halfway through, I guess, the first part of it. So I got to go sit in the audience and see the rest of it.
Wow.
Seeing Dave Grohl play with the Nirvana. It was just mind-blowing, some of the performances, and so iconic. My wife and I went to the 40th anniversary of SNL, and the party afterward was crazy. It was very loose, and it was just there was no organized music, and there was a band that just people went up on the stage and started playing. There were instruments, and Fred and I went up and sang Love Shack. Prince played. It was just like, whoa.
Did you ever expect that you'd be as big as you are, that you'd be these icons, that you'd have that kind of success, that what was the goal? Because it's kind of like Devo in a way where it's like, yeah, you couldn't have planned it or expected it.
Well, when we started, though, we didn't really of course, we had no idea. And then after Ricky died in 1985, it did seem like that might be the end. And there were periods of time when someone in the band said, I quit. And I think I'm the only person in the band that never said I'm quitting, because everyone else at some point, I'm quitting and this is it. But of course it never was, and it's still going, but we didn't really know what was going to happen. But after after Ricky died, we spent a year just grieving and just disorientation and grief. And then Keith Strickland started writing some music, and he lived across this pond from me, and I would canoe over there. And then he said, I have some music that I've been working on. And I said, wow, that's really great. And then he played it for the rest of the band, and we got inspired and also realized what a precious thing we had with each other. And it was more to do with just trying to heal. And we made the only thing we said, we're not doing this for commercial, we're not trying to be a hit. We're just doing this for ourselves and for our fans and to heal. And what happened was pretty amazing, because I think when it really comes from your heart, that the songs really shine in that way, really reflect that kind of intention.
When I was doing the research for this interview, I did realize, it's kind of crazy, but obviously I'm trying to be delicate talking about something so sad, but Ricky's death was 85. So it was this year was 40 years ago. I know, it's crazy. And as I mentioned, I think the B-52s have a made for biopic, like it's one of the greatest comeback stories of all time. It must have been very bittersweet when you had the biggest commercial success. And it was under those circumstances.
I think because a lot of the songs harken back to that time when we were in Athens and time of innocence with Ricky. And, I think that's one of the reasons it was a success, because he inspired it in a lot of ways. I feel like there were a lot of times when I think we felt like he was there in the room. Just, I think he would have been very happy of the success.
He kept his illness secret from you guys, or you didn't know for most of the time that he was ill?
Only Keith knew, and Ricky was very, very private, and he was shy and very private, and he didn't want people to fuss over him, and of course it was, or worry basically, but it was during a very early part of the AIDS pandemic or epidemic, and nobody really knew. There was the gay virus, and Rock Hudson had passed away, so
Yeah.
there was stigma attached to it, and there was his family to consider, and it was just so weird because nobody knew what was happening, and it was so sudden. And I really feel like he could have lived, if only there had been some kind of medicine or something, some more knowledge of what was going on. But he wasn't. We rehearsed just a few days before, and then we were supposed to rehearse, and he was getting thin, but we didn't. We were in denial. And also the number of people after that too that died of just whole swaths of friends and amazing, amazing artists and people who passed away. And it was just a very devastating time, but also a time of some great art and music happening too.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, how sometimes there'll be maybe a darker message or whatever in your music, but on the surface, it always feels cheerful. Party band, as you say. So is that a way that you guys, or you personally, I should ask you, is that a way you process trauma or whatever is through music that feels optimistic, that feels sunny?
As I said, we didn't really have an intention except to just do this for ourselves. And so we would jam. And I remember jamming on Deadbeat Club, and the words just poured out like in the first jam session. Because sometimes we'll have multiple jam sessions and we'll have to listen and pick out parts, but we sort of collage the parts together. But Deadbeat Club, it just sort of all flowed. And that one is the most sort of autobiographical, and remembering things we all did together in Athens, like dance when it was hot out and it would rain. We would just take our clothes off and grab a sheet or a old blanket and go out and dance. And that was inspired by our friend Jeremy Ayers. So there was a larger group of friends in Athens that's sort of crazy, and artists and musicians, and it was a fun time. So I think that was the inspiration, remembering those times, not just the bad times. Except, that Ricky passed away, that and the whole AIDS thing, was just overwhelming. But Cosmic Thing was really inspired by a time that was fun and innocent and creative.
Isn't Jeremy Ayers referenced on Radio and Rainbows? Isn't there a song about him or mentioning him?
There's a whole song about him, If You Give Your Heart to Science. And that's another thing that's just sort of magical and weird, how when you write songs, I had no intention of writing a song about Jeremy or how he died, face down in the garden. What a lovely way to go, because he donated his body to science. So that was the inspiration for that song. But that's another song that I had no idea I was going to write that song or about Jeremy. But I just feel like he passed away, and he was a big inspiration to us and to REM. He was very creative, lived this artist life of always drawing and painting and photographing, and he loved people. He was interested in people all the time. And so that was a good, I feel like it was cathartic to write that song. But again, I had no plan, just popped out.
Are there any other songs on Radio and Rainbows that you have stories about, songs that where the inspiration was particularly meaningful, special to you?
This is the most autobiographical album, and a lot of it is very much about my life and revealing things. And I think Always Till Now is harking back to a former relationship. Then also The Beauty of It All really is about my wife Monica. When I met her, had been in a very bad relationship, and when I met her, she really made me feel so much better and got me out of this sort of hole I was in and inspired me. So that was very autobiographical, and Higher Place also. So I think a lot of them. And then there's Pillow Queen, which is just fun.
There's one last thing I wanted to ask you before I let you go. Again, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. But kind of recently, I did a podcast. It was the Totally 80s podcast where I had Gina Shock from the Go-Go's and Lil Tolhurst from The Cure, both inductees, talk about who they from the 80s would like to see inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And Gina's number one pick was the B-52s. That was her first pick, first draft. I wholeheartly agree. I'm curious about your thoughts. You've both been nominated, I think, 3 times, passed over every time, which is BS. But I don't think the B-52s, despite everything you've done culturally and commercially, because I know that they care about, success, you've never even been nominated. And everything you've done as, queer pioneers, all the things we've just even talked about in this interview, about all the intersection of pop culture, women in rock, putting Athens on the map. Like, what the hell? Like, you need to be, does it matter to you?
Well, most musicians say, I don't care. And Fred always says, I don't care. We're inducted into the Georgia Music Hall of Fame. And that's a big honor. And that was a thrill. But it would be nice to be recognized, but we can't all be in it. I just don't see why yes, we can all be in it. I feel like it shouldn't be. I'm just against the whole idea of it in some ways. It's just not a race. It's not a contest. I just don't really like the concept of it so much, but yes, it would be nice. I wouldn't say no if they invited us into it, but it's not a big deal. We are who we are anyway.